Once again, it's the Lean Into Artcast, the show where a couple of visual storytellers get together, take a walk around a topic, try to think about it really hard for a little while, and then try to discuss ways to put all that thinking into use. We think hard about visual storytelling, so you will too. My name is Jersey Droz, cartoonist and teaching artist. The other host is...
Hey, I'm Rob Stenzinger. I am a coder and designer in the human-centric kind of way. How you doing, Jersey?
I'm okay. I assume you are energized for tonight because if anybody follows your Instagram feed...
Well, I saw Iron Maiden last night, and that is definitely a fountain of power. And I don't like to reveal my secret too much, but yeah, I mean, I lay in a coffin with Maiden CDs. I did. And now it's out.
I wasn't expecting that one. See, I've been to an Iron Maiden concert once, and if you haven't been, it is like that scene at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark when they open the Ark and all that lightning comes out and goes through the Nazis. It's kind of just like that.
And that's not really an exaggeration. It's no. It's pretty fun. It's very lively music. Their whole a lot of the heart of their music is exploring different aspects of the human condition through stories that resonate with them and also key historical events. I've often referred to the music, and I think others have too, as essentially like heavy metal book report. But it takes you on. It's a lot of storytelling. Takes you on an emotional arc. A lot like that's a typical metal thing. You know, get you curious when it's mellow, and then like boom, get you fired up when it's intense, and then might let you down at the end, or might just crank it up until you explode. Either way.
Okay, well, as a fellow Maiden fan, I have to know, what was the highlight of the show? Best piece. Ooh.
I think oh gosh, it's off the latest album. It's the oh my gosh, it's a Book of Souls. Yeah. It was pretty great. I guess that essentially that song is about the rise and fall of the Mayan civilization, and that that was a great like sound high of the show. But then there's classic set pieces like their song "Hallowed Be Thy Name," which is about someone getting very thoughtful before they're about to be put to death by hanging, and as and it sort of puts you through that person's thoughtful journey as they're about to wrap things up.
Oh.
Well,
cool.
But it's an amazing song with just soaring guitars, lots of great metal screaming by Bruce Dickinson and all that.
Did a rubber Eddie come out at any point during the show?
Yes, a rubber Eddie came out, and Bruce punched it through the chest and pulled out a heart. Which he then infused it with stage blood and was essentially dousing Yannick Gers, which is the third guitarist of Maiden. And
wow,
yeah,
he did not do that when I saw him.
Well, I think it's funny. They've I just think they're really well funded to have like a nice, consistent big show. There's a good bit of wardrobe changes. The set constantly evolves and kind of peels away in layers. There's different creatures that all of a sudden inflate, and are like just hanging out over the stage or what have you. It's a very theatrical performance, and that's it's a ton of fun because they all get into it. And I don't know, and
they're committed to it, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
very much so. They all have their sort of their quirks, and it's one of those things. If you listen to a band for that many years, you end up they're all sort of these kind of lovely characters that are fun to enjoy along with the music.
So what you just did there, Rob, you told a story. Told a story about a piece of your life, and the thoughts and observations you make in that story add up to your sort of your worldview as a visual storyteller, and in sharing that, we get a little bit of more of a glimpse into how you approach things in your work. In other words, this is grabbing some of the incidental pieces of your life as a visual storyteller and then using it as fodder for discussion on another thing that you make, right?
Totally. Then you put it on a social network,
Yep.
and stand back as the bundles of cash start getting thrown at you.
Oh, I missed that
Wait a
part.
minute. No, wait. Me too, actually.
Oh, okay.
No,
I thought you were
I just
bringing
was,
some awesome secrets in the on the ground section.
no. This is fancy. This is fantasy, except except the part where that's our topic today is the whole getting that sharing piece out of your projects. And you mentioned it may not come directly from the projects. It might be adventures you're having while you're making your stuff.
This is one of those evergreen topics that we kind of come back to again and again and again on the show. And it's something where I think for the both of us, I think it's fair to say that it's been a bit of a blind spot at times, right? It's something we both copped to, is that it's not, we don't jump readily into sharing everything about our lives and all of our opinions and all of our feelings and all of our worldviews about everything. And so as a result, at least speaking only for myself, there can be this static sometimes between me and sharing the pieces of the stuff that I make, or
like,
the
like
thoughts.
if you were sharing things over ham radio, it's like, hey, there's the Jersey Hour. Oh, it's over. No, I just hear
Yep. That's exactly it. And
Okay.
why am I even bringing this up? Because, I think at this point we've all heard it enough that, like, it's not enough. If you want to make the thing that you're making into a sustainable thing, it's not enough to simply make it and tell people, like, hey, I made a thing. You have to sort of build, like, a dialogue around the thing, right? Presence is very important. Go ahead. What are you saying?
Yeah, because if you're making a thing in context of a bigger machine, there are other people in the machine taking care of those parts for you. And
Right.
those are necessary parts. Making a group that is interested, having it be possible for them to be aware of a thing that you make it's distribution, it's marketing, and those are hats. Those are real concerns that don't just vanish once you're able to make something and then go through the act of sharing it. Those jobs still have a purpose.
And while this has been an ongoing discussion between the two of us, and it's been an ongoing pain point, at least for me, for the last however many years, it's been drawn into greater relief for me in that in the last couple of years, we've started a Patreon for Lean Into Art, and I do a Patreon for Boulder and Fleet, where there are there's explicit trade going on there, and there is more of a I want to say a pressure, maybe not a pressure, but there's an incentive for me to broadcast into that channel more regularly, because there are people who have made it clear to me that they're listening, right? And we've talked about this in past episodes with other creators and amongst ourselves about this idea of, like, well, how do you keep that lean? How do you keep that so that you're not creating another thing on top of the thing that people are trying to fund? And that kind of thinking is something I've been puzzling over a lot over the last couple of years. And that thinking has trickled down into the other avenues through which I keep a dialogue, or attempt to keep a dialogue around the stuff that I make. So therein lies the framing, right, of what we're going to talk about today. How do you find things to post about while making a thing, right? And how can you mine the stories in the making of the thing and the stories of your life to identify the incidental, the things that are automatically already there through the making of the thing, so as not to have to make another thing on top of the thing? Does that describe it?
So much making so many things. Trying to make sense of this.
Try to keep it open so we're not just talking about comics.
Yeah.
Because that's my bias, Rob. But before we go there, before we start talking about making so many things, we got an ad spot that we got to run here, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
We got to advertise on the show. Speaking of, and this is the modeling activity, speaking of making things and the incidental, here we go. What do you want to talk about?
Well, so we have sponsors of Lean Into Art. There's a way to actually reach out to so this ad spot could rotate, but right now we are the sponsors. Jersey Drost, Rob Stenzinger, we sponsor Lean Into Art. And we also make that. And how we sponsor this is through projects that we put into the world. So let's take a look at a couple of them. First off, I would say let's talk about Galaxy of Super Adventure. That is a podcast that Jersey makes with some excellent collaborators, Ben Hatke and Zach Giolongo. And it's so if you're like if you have more time at your art desk or in your commute and you're thinking of some energetic, fascinating, thoughtful, super fun, character-filled exploration of creative topics, you've got to add this to your podcatcher. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's the log line is that it's storytelling topics like the kind of things you're talking about on Lean Into Art, but more like an excuse to have an audio puppet show, right? So it's like, okay, we're going to talk about, like, the latest episode at the time of this recording is episode 11, where Zach and I spend a lot of time talking about 80s cartoons. It's like, okay, let's talk about 80s cartoons, but only so that we have an excuse to have zany space characters show up on our pretend spaceship. The premise is that 3 cartoonists rented a spaceship and fly into outer space so that they can have conversations about comic storytelling. And they are set upon from time to time by different cosmic creatures like Princess Tentacula or Rankin the Space Elf or Mud Patch the Pony, with whom I went to elementary school, apparently. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is a ton of fun. Highly recommend it. And there's a lot to learn there, but it's wild. It's like it really is some kind of combination of like Pee-wee's Playhouse with the Muppet Show with like behind the scenes making art kind of thing, but very comics focused overall. It's really cool.
Thanks, man. Yeah, there's also, like, I always hear the Great Space Coaster theme every time I see the logo. You remember that show?
I do. So yeah, it's got a lot of that energy in it, but not much Baxter nor Gary Gnu.
Hey, maybe we should have some kind of Gary Gnu type character. Anyway, yes, that's at comicsaregreat.com/GOSA, G-O-S-A, for Galaxy of Super Adventure. The other thing we want to talk about today is the video game construction kit at creativecodekit.com. What is this thing, Rob? What is this construction kit? This is something I assume is going to help me make video games.
Yes, it is. So if you are thinking of dabbling or exploring or continuing your exploration of making games, especially with web-related stuff, your web browser is an amazingly capable platform. You have that, and then the ability to edit text and to look at that text in your web browser. You actually can make games with just that. And what this book is, it's in a way it's a choose your own adventure workshop with the book, but then it also comes with this free and open source set of resources, sounds, some visual art, a lot of code and examples, and actually a working game. So what you end up doing is choosing your own path through these different topics and exploring aspects of making a video game, and whether that's code, sound, animation, anything, honestly, and it's and if you're curious how that kind of stuff works, this is a really good way to explore that. It even covers some basics as far as what's HTML, CSS, and even this code stuff, like what's a variable, what's a loop, and how do you make stuff happen sometimes but not other times, like conditionals. So it's an introductory text, and it's meant, and it is a game itself. As you play it, you essentially collect achievements for accomplishing all the different things.
And if anybody remembers, a couple episodes ago, Rob taught me how to code in JavaScript, right? And if you walked away from that episode going like, okay, well, that shows that there's more, that this is a learnable skill, that you don't have to have like a special kind of brain to do it, this would be the next step. After walking away from that episode, go check out creativecodekit.com. You can get a Kindle version, an EPUB version, and even an iBook version. on that website. But
Mm-hmm.
if you are saying, well, but really I'm here, it's leaning to art, I just like the way you guys approach storytelling problems, that's really the value I get from you guys, then the place to get extra value is to go to leanintoart.com/workshops, and that's where there's a whole bunch of videos by Rob and myself where we do video workshops on these very topics, where it's less about us discussing the topic and more about us teaching the topic. Comics classes, storytelling UI classes, turning jokes into comics, making video games from your creator-owned comics, all there at leanintoart.com/workshops. And thanks to everybody who has been checking those out and downloading them and supporting us in that way. Ready to go 10,000 feet up, Rob?
Yeah, let's take a walk around this topic.
I don't get fired up. Time to go 10,000 feet up, talk about the topic in abstract. Wow, that is a successful piece of music.
It's pure joy.
It's amazing how certain stories like that, like those kinds of audio cues, can become exceedingly powerful. I know there's a couple shows where, like, when a certain little, like, a certain riff happens, it's like I could do anything now.
It's what a great feeling, and combining the animation with that super upbeat danceable music.
If I remember right, isn't it Goku running on the back of the dragon in the beginning?
Let's see. A lot of it is, let's see. So the
I'm watching Rob run through the animation in his mind.
Well, it's funny because I have it on in the background a lot, and then I watch the different parts of the intro, but it's kind of hodgepodgey. There's a lot of the characters zooming around in vehicles. There is sort of I don't think there's a Dragon Road thing. That's more Dragon Ball Z.
Dragon Ball Z, okay.
Yeah. So there's I think you see like a cartoony version of Shenron, the dragon, the Earth Dragon for Dragon Ball Z. But that's just with the logo and stuff. Anyway, it's a lot of fun action and whatever. And then you see Goku transform into his Saiyan gargantuan ape form and punch through a castle, which is awesome. So and I'm pretty sure it's related to what we're about to talk about.
No, it is. I mean, yeah, like, so as we talked at the top, it's like, as I well, actually, this is very related because, like, I've been recently started introducing myself to the Thundercats show, which when I was, and we talk about this in the Galaxy Super Adventure episode 11, which we just talked about, and it was a show that aired a lot when I was a kid. Oh my gosh, I'm getting so many Hangouts notifications. I gotta stop this right now. Stop Hangout notifications. Okay, sorry. Anyway, where was I? Oh, so it was a show I watched a lot as a kid, and wasn't like crazy about it. I wasn't like a super Thundercats kid, but it was like a show that, like, if it was on, I would watch it. Started watching it recently as a grown up and completely fell head over heels for it. And so part of my social feed has become me sharing screen grabs of parts of the show that have delighted and surprised me. So that was the kind of thing where I noticed this is a shareable thing. This is something where I can identify, this is what I respond to as a storyteller. This is what I think about when I'm writing stories all the time. It can become part of the dialogue and the narrative I surround my thing with, right?
Yeah, that's it. It's a really natural source too, because I mean, something that's energizing you. You're inherently sharing some aspect of it as you're infusing it into your work. Then why not take sort of this tourist view of it, where it's like, you know what, this part is awesome. Why not? And I'm saying why not a little bit because it's funny. I don't know if we're getting on the ground too far right now, just going into this specific of an angle, but that's something I really want to coach myself to notice more. That why not, right? Because for instance, let's see, what I think on the first time I traveled to see Iron Maiden for instance, I think I deleted the tweet where I shared the where it was me at the concert in like 2007 or 8 or something like that.
Okay,
I
why?
know why.
That's 10,000 feet up stuff. Why did you delete the tweet?
Yeah. Well, because I guess I was really torn of like, well, why am I sharing stuff here? I know I'm making this comic. It was during the early on in the days of Art Geek Zoo, and I just didn't know, like, is that a service to like bring in this other topic stuff? Is it okay to, what do I use this for? And is it putting people out to be like, oh, but this isn't about the comic, that the reason that I made this account, this is about this other thing. And anyway, I remember wrestling with that. Nowadays I would share it. And it would be occasional because, yeah, for the whole whatever ham radio that comes out of my brain, it goes static quite frequently with these little blips. Like, I did a
Right.
sketch. I went to Maiden, made a podcast.
Right, right. See, I think that's part of our. We both share this. Is this? I don't know if this is a bias or if this is just like a predisposition or what. I think it's a bias, where we think that we can only broadcast when we have something substantive to share. I made a thing. Here's a complex thought. Here is something that is built to assist you. Here's a link to something that can assist you. But there's always, like, for me at least, there's always this inhibition to say, like, I like a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this goes to part of the original problem that we face when we're trying to build a dialogue around a thing that we're making is, how do we build the dialogue around it without it turning into, look at the thing I made, 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 right?
Well, it could be. Look at the thing I made. How does it make you feel? How long did it make you feel that way? You coming back? That kind of thing. It's still like, it could be different questions all about the thing you made. But
Certainly.
yeah, it's inherently this trap of self-involvement for a project that is not dissimilar to sometimes what you find with different brands and how they'll say, use this hashtag, and they think like, boy, that's a lot of people. Why? Who cares? So like, what's unifying them with this? What service is this really bringing those people? And maybe there is something there. I'm presenting it in the light of like, oh, this is something I reflexively don't find attractive, yet maybe there is something there because people do it.
Okay, but let me attempt to add some complexity to this thing.
Okay.
So I got a Patreon, and I want people to support me on Patreon. I want people to support my Boulder and Fleet comic on Patreon, right?
Mm-hmm.
How? Okay, and this is something we talked about a lot before. And we talked about this with Brandon Dayton. We talked about this with John Rosenberg in past episodes. There's a whole bunch of related episodes that we'll talk about in a second, where like, we follow up for more of our discussions on this very topic. But the question is that, like, if you run a Patreon, the explicit use case is vehicle or platform through which people can support you for doing the thing you're already doing, right? They warn you up front, and they're like, really don't think about this as trying to create a whole bunch of like fulfillment rewards, right? Where it's like, if you support me, you get a tote bag. If you support me at this level, you get this. If you support me at this level, you get that. Because now you're creating extra jobs for yourself, right? So try to be lean and try to keep it simple so as not to, because what you're really trying to do is get people to support you just for doing the thing you're already doing, okay? Granted. Let's operate under that premise. Now, how do I create a dialogue around that without it turning into me just saying, like, hey, everybody, do you know I have a Patreon? Support me on Patreon, would you? That'd be cool. You can. That's not exactly the most alluring, sales pitch in the entire world. So it gets me thinking, okay, well, I do need to put something into that channel. I need to put something into that feed that is attractive to people, that is like useful or interesting or at least visually pleasing to get them to convert, right? This is where we start talking about that conversion funnel.
Mm-hmm.
So I do need to share something, right?
Oh, I don't know. Honestly, like, do you have to? I no, but let's see. Would you inherently think of it as an experiment? Would you see different results based on doing nothing versus doing a bunch of different somethings? And would those different somethings yield, what would they yield? Uh, Tough to say. It sounds like something to discover, right? But inherently, you've got so a conversion funnel. It's that would be like the progression of. I do have there's a section on this in the storytelling to make your comics UI awesome, and the 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 basic idea is that you've got people out there in the world. People out there in the world may become aware of you. Okay, so aware is like this initial step, but then they may come explore, investigate a little bit more. Maybe they become interested after that, and then now they're really, exploring around and maybe checking out a few different pages of your comic, maybe looking at your store, and then maybe they're coming back to do that over and over again. And then, so as you described, so all of these are behaviors you can observe and see if what you're doing is causing change in the world, right? And if you see, and then if what is the range of behavior and how does it progress? It's a little bit of a, it's not. The funnel isn't perfect. Someone could go from being just interested to then just supporting you on Patreon. People can jump. It's not like perfectly step by step linear thing. But I do think it's a helpful way to, as a metaphor, to think about how people are behaving with the stuff that you make. And then if you're finding a way to observe that, like by using your traffic metrics or store, let's see, does Gumroad offer visits and whatnot? Some stores allow you to embed a Google analytics code and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Tumblr does too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, for sure. And so there's ways to and then that's how you essentially make it possible to start observing these things. And that's a bit of an exploration down what the conversion funnel and what is that thing. And it's important that it's not perfect, but it's handy to measure it, because then you can notice is what you're doing have an effect, and at least look at it sometimes. The biggest effect that you want to see is your how many units of your product are you selling, how many subscribers are you gaining, that kind of thing. But it's kind of nice to be able to see the other parts of the funnel.
And Twitter has analytics now. Patreon has analytics now. Their own stats and measurements of interaction with your stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
Facebook Pages has that.
Even Instagram, I notice, has views now, not just actual likes.
Seriously?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go to look right now. I noticed that they have that with video. They have it with photos too?
Yes.
Oh, I'll be darned.
So, all right.
Okay.
So, conversion funnel. Set that aside. You were talking more about the. So you have a Patreon, making a conversation about it. Now what?
Right. Where do you find the conversation pieces? I think is a tough part. The two places I want to go, at least this is my intention, but obviously we can go anywhere. Is how do you find the story moments? The stuff that's the incidental pieces in there that are worth sharing, and then how do you collect them, and how do you systematize a way of sharing them, and some of the problems with that at least I've run into. Adam, at you. So what I'm doing, everybody, is this is a completely self-motivated episode, because this is me just asking Rob for help in public, and then sort of working out the problem together and hope that it's helpful to somebody else. There's one of those incidentals. I got a problem.
It's me going through the learning and adapting process enough to hopefully provide something of value.
Perfect.
Yes.
But just I threw out a little hint earlier that we've talked about this a lot throughout all the years we've been doing the show. Like in episode 49, we talked about authenticity, how to make something that has a feeling of authenticity and has a sense of voice with it. Episode 82, we talked about where do you blog, right? Like what platforms are there out there? And it's an older episode, so some of the things that might have changed since then, but some of the principles I think are at work there. Like, are you going to do something where you post natively everywhere, or are you going to do something where you automate that? And how often do you do it? And, how do we think about it at that point? A great one is episode 84 with Ryan Estrada, getting a reaction and showcasing yourself, where Ryan walks through this idea of like how do you seed your site with things that are attractive and interesting to people, and set up your site in such a way so that after they've clicked that link, because everybody loves this particular, here's my great, BB-8 R2D2 mixed marriage fanfic. Everybody goes to click that link, and now you got like it's populated with just the right things to say, like, okay, if you like this, here's everything else that I make that you'll like, right? Episode 98. What are you seeing, Rob?
Nothing. I love your content generator in your brain. So this, So marketing, art, and artist. Is that the one where we had John Rosenberg on, or was that
No?
99?
That was Patreon for the Arts. That was when we were just,
Patreon for the arts, right? So that was 99.
that was 99. Good
Okay.
memory.
All right. What was in marketing, art, and artist?
That was us. It was us further exploring the idea of that we explored with Ryan, right? It's like how okay, so now
Yeah.
like instead of
What?
trying to do like the virality things, like how do you craft the message of what you have to offer, and how do you refine that message, and what places do you put that message?
It's a okay. So in podcasting, your art journal is another one, which is inherently sort of this content mine that's essentially an exercise that we do every year. So 2 years in a row with Art Sound Off, right? Where that's a 30-day challenge where you're podcasting about your art day, and inherently going through this practice, building a skill. Maybe if you haven't done it much yet, that all of a sudden is this new resource for you to delve into and share, which may not be that as far as shareable extra work things go, depending on the format of your podcast, and especially if it's more journal focused or what have you, it doesn't have to be that much of an investment.
Right. And so what's embedded in this topic? What are some of the things that like are potential, vectors we can take is, we're talking about marketing yourself and your work, marketing whatever products that you're making. So again, my product is my comic Boulder Fleet. I want to market that. Also building evidence for potential future gigs, right? And like we both have gotten gigs through just sharing stuff that we like to make, right? It doesn't happen 100% of the time, doesn't happen like every day, but every once in a while it's like this body of work that you create becomes this trail that people can say like, okay, I see what Jersey's all about. I have a gig that is very much suited to that temperament. Let's see if he's interested, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then also probably the most important one to me right now, especially because it's spring, and every spring my life goes completely bonkers with A2 CAF and springtime gigs that show up every year. Working with limited bandwidth. There's a very small voice inside of me that gets very frustrated with the dialogue of you got to keep a conversation around your stuff. Got to keep a conversation around your stuff. And that little tiny voice says, "Look, I'm trying just to make the stuff. Get off my back. I'm not sharing anything today. I'm working." And I know that that's not productive. It's not a helpful voice. It's there, but it's not the most useful thing. It's not the most useful way to engage with the problem. So, how do we do this how do we navigate all this while having scarce bandwidth as well?
So that's, it would be, design constraints come in many forms. So you have your time, you have your potentially revenue stream or what have you. You're like, well, okay, this project, maybe it's making this much money. Do I want to, get an assistant or work with some service that could help me with this or buy a tool or what, right? That's yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
ways
okay,
to
there's one of my constraints is I don't have the resources to outsource this. This is something that really has to fall on my shoulders for now.
hmm
Um, I man, that'd be really cool to have the resources to say like I'm gonna make somebody else do that. That'd be pretty cool. Um, okay, I just wanted to broach this sort of with you and sort of kick it around back and forth with you. So right now, and I think we kind of talked about this off mic actually last week, just a tiny bit. This idea of trying to look for the incidental in the stuff we make so that the thing we're making is producing little tiny bits and pieces that can be recombobulated into things that are either part of the conversation or a product in and of themselves, right? So, for instance, with the Boulder and Fleet Patreon, and maybe I should pull that up real quick. Actually, you won't see it because it's only for my patrons. I was going to pull up the Boulder and Fleet Patreon to show one of these posts, but
Hmm.
for patrons only. So can't even show it on the show.
I would do it, but it's fantastic exclusive content, only available to my patrons.
Only available to people who are of good of heart. No.
No, it's very interesting. That's a trade off. That well, that exclusivity. Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and part of it is you want to honor the people who are actually paying for that exclusivity. Anyway,
Yeah.
but like things that I do is recently is I look for things where, oh, this scene that just dropped on the website was not the original idea. I have a sketched out version that was very different, where I don't like what that direction said about the characters. If I went in this direction, I'd be saying something very different about Fleet, or very different about one of the mineral gals, or very different about whoever, right? And so I adjusted, changed gears, and so it's an alternate take. It's a cut scene. It's an alternate universe version of what could have been in this comic had I made a different choice. And so whenever that happens, I grab that and I hang on to it and I go, okay, that's an opportunity to do like a Thunder Punch Daily about it and explain the process, or do a blog post about it and show here's the before and after, here's what changed. Here's where also when I make mistakes, where it's like I get to a point in the page, I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? I got to fix all of this, right? That's something that's, I think, interesting to somebody who might be, you know, really plugged into the work that I'm doing. They might want to know, or it might be interesting to them to see that kind of that not just process, but also that being sort of in on the decision making process, right? Like so, like the sales pitch I did initially with the Patreon is I'm inviting them along for the journey with me in making the thing, right?
hmm
So you know, I tried to ask myself, what are some of the things, like how do I identify those things? How do I find the things that are worthy of capturing and repackaging as a new thing and which aren't? Because in all these cases, I'm not actually drawing anything new. I'm not actually making anything new, right? I'm just grabbing from the materials that went into making the thing and sort of just talking about them a little bit. So there we get like that incidental and that leanness while still creating a richer discussion around the thing that you're making.
It sounds like it's a little bit of an investment. Yet it's based on this naturally recurring resource. That's part of what you've been making anyway, but with just this little extra something there.
Right. So, I've got a list of questions that I ask myself. I'm wondering if you had any to add to this list, or do you want me just to go through mine and you respond to them? Want me just to go through mine and?
Yeah, go through yours.
Okay, so I asked myself this afternoon. I'm like, okay, well, how am I noticing these things? And yes, we can go back to the old classic ETP, right? Yes, journaling, huge. Journaling, sort of like, and I know we talk about it a lot, but it trains us to be attentive to these things, right? But also, I think about like what changed. What changed from the initial idea to the finished idea? Did anything change, or did it happen exactly? If it happened exactly, then that's even something that can be discussed, right? It's like, wow, this one, I nailed it on the thumbnail, you know. That's interesting. I didn't have to do any editing. Um, when was I uncomfortable with what I was doing? So I did a blog post a while back where we just went through the scene where one of the leader of the Mineral Gals in Boulder and Fleet kind of has an honest emotional moment. She's been acting like a supervillain for the whole thing, but then she has this one moment in the story where she's like, "Oh, I'm being sincere. I'm being candid right now," and wasn't the easiest thing for me to write because I didn't trust myself that I could do it without being ham-fisted and awful, and like super sentimental, even though I am super sentimental.
Mm.
But that so I
Why would that have been bad?
because I perceive that sentimentality is not an honored trait amongst the general public. Now that is my interpretation, right? That is not necessarily the truth. Um,
But that's an example of like a little bias popping up and getting in the way. I mean,
yeah,
of something while you're making the thing, but then, yeah,
yeah, that was part of the dissonance, right? It's like, oh, I don't know about this. I think this feels right to me,
yeah,
but is this going to work on the audience? Is this going to land? Right? That's part of the tension you're always navigating as a creator of a thing, right? People say, "Well, write for yourself." Okay, yes, but you also want the audience to get it.
yeah, yeah. If this, so one way this whole topic could wrap up is say, yell at the TV and write about your sandwich. Done. But if you have a tendency to like be concerned, like if you found
God
yourself
dang it.
yelling at the TV and blog and only blogging about your sandwiches, then that may be that there's something about it. Like if I could come up with a better name than that, it's because I enjoy sometimes when I read when other people do that, but when I'm in that mode, I just don't trust I'm doing anything that's of benefit to anybody, even me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We both have that sort of that reflex that we want it to be of use to somebody. We want it to be justified somehow. That's kind of funny, you know. That's like a whole nother.
Well, that's just the body of work that we've made together. I mean, it's just continually revisiting that, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's over time though. I don't know how you feel about it, but I've become more comfortable with taking some of the gambles,
Yeah.
but they're calculated gambles, of course, because I do that, and they're but and there's and I'm also cool with that the fact that I do it. I'm like, that is my voice.
Right.
So that has been part of this process of exploring, because you get so much. One of the things that creates dissonance in any of these strategies is that you notice other people have different strategies.
Yes.
No big deal necessarily, but you can get inspired by them sometimes. Where look at let's see, I have nothing specific here, but I feel that she tends to be more boisterously free and expressive, like Casey Van Heist, right? We've had her on the show a few times.
And I adore Casey.
Super inspiring. Yet I don't know if that could ever be my voice.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's another part that is important to underline here, and it seems like it's a no-brainer, but it's something I think is really easy to forget. It's like, and this was on the Galaxy of Super Adventure show when we talked with Lucy Bellwood about creative fears, and one of the things I said on the show is that I watch her feed and I see how candid she is, and part of me is repulsed by it. It's like, oh, you don't talk about that stuff. This makes my Midwestern blood run cold. But then the other part of me is like, oh, she's so brave. She's so courageous the way she talks about that stuff. And then I said, I'm not comfortable voicing my opinions that way so loudly. And she said, oh, I don't talk about opinions. She said, I have no problem talking about feelings, but I don't talk about opinions. That I'm nervous about. And I was like, oh, there's another level of this thing. Some people I follow are super loose with their opinions. And then I looked at Lucy's feed again. I'm like, you're right. She doesn't talk about her opinions as much as she talks about how she feels about what's going on. So
That's
all
a
I'm
really
trying to
big
get at
distinction.
here,
Very interesting.
right? I was just trying to get at like this explicit sort of rubric, right?
Yeah.
And not to say that there needs to be a pre-flight checklist every time I say anything, but it's sort of a way of whenever, like going back to when you were talking about like, do I need to share this Iron Maiden thing? Going back and going like, okay, if I'm feeling dissonance, let's go through the checklist. Does it meet these things? Is this, in other words, is this a thing where I'm just in kind of a weird mood? Or is this a thing where, and I need to go through that checklist to just like to double check myself? Or is this something where my gut is telling me something about like, this isn't the right thing to say at this particular time, right?
Yeah.
So I was trying to come up with my own. Is like, okay, well, you know, like when I was uncomfortable with something, that's potentially shareable, right? There's a story there. What made Jersey uncomfortable and why? And how can you talk about this in a way that's actually like useful and not just complaining? Right? There's a difference between experiencing creative discomfort and saying this is hard.
Yeah, I mean, so honestly, I look for different outlets for the this is hard, right?
Yeah.
I want to have a call where I can be completely vulnerable with friends,
Yes.
and within a circle of trust,
Yep.
essentially. Yep.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I have friends who, when we talk privately, they'll say like, "Oh, this should be, you know, a blog post." I'm like, "No, no, it shouldn't. This is for us." And that's okay, you know.
Yeah, it is.
And then also something that I've tried to remind myself of is when I'm especially pleased with what I did, right? I'm pleased with the outcome. This was a tricky situation. I managed to conquer it, and I'm happy about that. Or, man, this may be an easy pose for me to pull off, but I landed it. I landed the pose, and I'm happy about that. That gets to be shared, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Design of this thing is super fun. That gets to be shared. And then also, I mean, like probably a big one is like when do I know why I changed a thing? Because then I can, if God willing, it fosters discussion, I'm ready. You know, I'm ready to get engaged in that. Whereas if I don't know and I go like, oh, this changed, and like, well, why did you change it? I don't know. I'm just feeling my way through it. There's a great conversation, right? So
It can be. But I mean, you know, if this were Galaxy of Super Adventure, then then bam, characters like
that's true.
doing something funny. And
That's true. That is one of the nice things about that show is we have that luxury of like, oh, did we just run out of steam? Whoops, there's a horse here.
See, that's good stuff. Okay.
Okay, but let me ask you this before we switch over to talking on the ground. Is there anything else that like that's in your rubric?
I think about sort of the stuff I've shared before, and if something similar or seems to continue a conversation, or this topic came up again, like I might point that out or call back or something to try to continue a conversation, almost like let's see, trying. And I don't have a great example, but I feel like it's a rubric thing of is this something I can use to continue a conversation?
Right.
So,
Is there a thread of narrative in there? Yeah,
yes,
and I feel like that's kind of you know, there's this movie, the Superman and Batman beating each other up movie, and this is one of those things where, like, as an opinion thing, I don't feel like I really need to get involved in that fight. A, because the stakes are pretty low. It's a movie. Movies get made. And B is like I feel like I've got the Supergirl show and I love it so much. I'm like that itch is scratched for me. I get to watch this really awesome person with the Superman logo be really, really good and help people. That makes me so happy. I don't need to see anything more than that. But, and by the way, like as a side note, I'm actually kind of grateful of the Superman versus Batman conversation because for the first time, I feel like in a long time, and this is totally an aside, I feel like the conversation about Superman has been elevated from the problem with the superpowered character. Like, because I feel like every time I get into that conversation, like this is a way to watch my. If you've ever seen me involved in this situation or this conversation in mixed company, folks, watch my eyes glaze over when somebody says, you know, the problem with Superman is he's just too darn powerful. You got to take away. I would depower him right away because it's just you can write more interesting stories if he's deep. Oh, Yeah. The thing I'm grateful for is that for the first time, I feel like most people are really talking about what makes him interesting is that the fact that the problem for him to solve is more of a ethical and a moral one, not a power one. Anyway, side note. But but I found like a way to sort of make my case about that topic through my investigation of other cartoons. So like when I find these moments where it's like, wow, I'm really impressed with how Thundercats found a way to do exciting action adventure while still exploring the nature of nonviolence and heroes solving problems through good choices and like consensus, bringing people together and forging alliances rather than just might makes right. And so I find those moments and I grab them and then I share them and go like, "Oh, Lionel, you're so great. I like you so much." And that's my way of sort of like chiming in on the topic without getting involved in the ugly, who's right, who's wrong kind of thing. Like,
Hmm.
does that make sense?
Yeah, it's
Um,
positive reinforcement.
Positive reinforcement, and it becomes an ongoing dialogue because I keep finding those moments, and that
Hmm.
becomes part of the chain. Like, here's another moment where Snarf says something that I really like. You know,
That's yeah, that's a stance thing too. I think it was a good number of years ago. The last time I kind of blasted something in social network wise, and it's and I don't I think it deserved it, but I'm not. Yeah, I like to. I mean, seriously, I don't know how many years ago that was. It was probably maybe 6 years ago, I would guess. And it's there's other. I like to find the positive bricks the best I can,
yeah,
and put those out there.
that's
And
just
that can sound like it's a simple, a really silly non philosophy, but I find that what I'm putting out there is a collective work. I look at it as. And not that it's like I have this canonical perfect thing I'm building and it's all got to be just so. Lots of moments and quirks and flubs and mistakes along the way happen. Yet, I, I, in going through the whole emotional wrestling of what do I put in this darn field as I'm going to share something with the world, doing that often enough, I've examined why am I not sharing this thing? Why am I sharing that thing? And then it's created this pattern that I've worked on. That so I yeah I well once again we share a common bias.
right. But you know what? I mean, in this particular case, in this thinking exercise, I think that what we're really what we're doing here is we're describing the identification of the bias and the attempt to work with it. And because I think in the past, at least I approached it as something that I needed to knock down, and I sort of had to like, quote unquote, deal with. We got to
Oh,
put this one to bed. This is really getting in the way. And in recent times, I'm thinking more like, okay, how can I work around it? Because it doesn't seem to be. It seems to be pretty baked in, and it's not. This tree isn't falling down very easily. So let's
it
work
doesn't
around
need
it a
to
little bit.
fall. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's I mean inherently that's I think the comfort with it isn't a complacency. It is a well-examined bias. It is
there we go.
it's a well-explored belief that is that it's the thing that sometimes I consider it creative voice. Like
Yes,
this is an essential element of my voice, and
right.
I'm finally becoming comfortable with that.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, so it's not nihilism as much as it is like, okay, well, I see the good in it too. Let's stop wrestling with it so much and see what we can do with it.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it doesn't have to be rigid. Let's see. I love that. Yeah.
so in 1 minute and 30 seconds, we are going to talk about different ways to identify those incidentals and also dealing with the incidentals with limited bandwidth. At least I'm going to pit that question against Rob and see how well he can cut through it. But before we do that, as I said, 1 minute and 30 seconds. Let me pull this up. And we do this show, and we ask for your support on Patreon. Patreon.com/leanintoart. What is Patreon? It's like Kickstarter, but for ongoing things. In other words, instead of having like a big project at the end that we ask for a bunch of financial support for, and then we make a thing every 2 weeks, actually every week, and we ask you to chip in a little bit every week, or every month rather, in order to make this thing sustainable. So if you go to patreon.com/leanintoart, you'll find not only this show, but also the show called Extra Lean that we record in between these episodes, where Rob and I just riff on a topic, sometimes without even having any idea what we're going to say before we turn the microphone on. And it's a lot of fun to do. But I want to take this moment to thank some of our top Patreon supporters, people who have been supporting us for a long time now, and we are so grateful to them. Owen Jolins at Comic Colorist on Twitter. That's ComicColorist. Professional comic book colorist who also shares wonderful things online. You can find him on Twitter at Comic Colorist. Spencer Hallam. Spencer, I couldn't find your Twitter, but I did find your website, and it's spencerhallam.com. Spencer, HALLAM.com. Becca Hilburn at Natto Soup on Twitter. Thank you, Becca, for supporting the show for so long. Dave Roman, my buddy Dave Roman, at Yaytime on Twitter, and he also makes a terrific comic called Star Bunny. And Nick Alot, at Nick J. Alot on Twitter. Nick has been so helpful to us in the past, and me in particular, with helping me with like manga studio tips and also supporting the show. Your guys' support means a ton to us. Thank you so much for helping to make this show sustainable, and I invite everybody else who's listening right now to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/leanintoart. Check out the extra leans, and please consider supporting us and making the show more sustainable. All right, Rob.
Yeah. Ready to take this on the ground?
I am, as evidenced by the music. Optimistic music, because I'm looking forward to kicking some things around with you that I've been really struggling with. Like how, now that I know how to identify the incidental, and I've actually got a backlog of incidentals that I've been collecting, but the real tricky part is finding the time to actually repackage them into something that's like, you know, formed with a cohesive thought, so as not to be like, look at this duel, right?
I'm laughing because I have a problem where I backlog stuff, and
Yeah.
I still do it, Jersey. There's so many things backlogged. It's just bad. I don't know why. Yeah, and yet, you know, I have practiced all last year, and a little bit of, you know, the few days wrapping around it. I did that unblocking project, which was a ton of fun. But where I put some kind of drawing, some kind of visual art in the world, it varied a lot. Sometimes it was just a doodle, but other times, you know, spent a lot more time. Anyway, incidentals, like, yeah, I've been collecting them again. And because some thoughts take a lot of work to share, I think. But, you know, it's like if you have, sorry, you hit this is an interesting, like, side thing, might be a whole separate show, but like that nerve that I have about, I did explore something. I learned a lot of cool stuff, like certain things I've been exploring with Python and this awesome thing called Jupyter. Some other data visualization stuff, some things with like Raspberry Pi and getting set up to do like a game workshop with it. I don't know, stuff like that where I want to talk more about it, but like to talk more about it and have it make any sense, at least in my mind, it's wrapped in this significant effort need.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Are you a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being super speedy, 1 being, you know, tortoise slow? How fast are you at writing? And when I say writing, I mean like compiling your thoughts into something that's transmittable, that you feel good about and are ready to put into the world, even if it's something as short as a status update.
Ooh. Yeah, I'm not tortoise, but I'm somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I tend to find decent value in posts that are like 500 words or more. And sometimes it's hard to get the right 500 words out
Right.
that talk about that journey or that exploration. Oh, I tried this thing. It was a lot of fun, and here's what it was like. And I think sometimes that friction it can be reduced. It's a learnable skill.
Certainly.
But
I
much like, yeah, you were describing your process too.
Yeah, I remember talking about this not too long ago. I can't remember where I was saying this, but I was talking with somebody about Twitter, and I was saying like it feels like Twitter is the platform for it's the ideal platform for excellent writers. Like you have to be really good to write with clarity and that kind of brevity. Like to be that pithy and that clear is super hard, right? And anybody
Mm-hmm.
who's ever posted something and had somebody misunderstand them knows what I'm talking about, right? And
Mm-hmm.
yes, it's a two-way street. You know, it takes somebody to actually attempt to do understanding. But you know, it's like I don't feel like I'm especially adept at condensing my thoughts down to something. Look at the length of these shows. We
Uh,
got, yeah,
that's both of us. But yeah, it's let's see. The sharing skill itself is but what's funny, even producing this content, like if we did write the Lean Into Artcast as blog posts, each one would be a week or more of effort. Like it would,
no question,
I would guess,
no question.
where we do have the process down to essentially the performance plus a little bit of time to do some prep. And depending on the topic, that little bit can be a little more coordination and whatnot. So let's say a few hours to a handful, maybe.
Right.
But that's pretty different than like the kinds of sharing that we're talking about. With if it's writing, in particular.
Yeah, it's super. It's way. It takes way long for me. It takes way longer to write something than to like sort of like suss it out verbally.
Okay.
Right.
How fast would you say you are on the tortoise to Millennium
Maybe a
Falcon or whatever?
four. Maybe a four, depending on the day. Some days I'm a three or a two. You know.
Mm.
Um, if there's a lot of resistance that day, oof, you know,
It's funny.
yeah,
Emails, I'm like a 2 or a 3 with emails. With blog posts, because I've kind of, I don't know, maybe I've climbed out of that to where like I feel like I'm a 5-ish, right?
okay,
But still, that's not fast enough to make it a low cost.
right, right. So that's part of the bandwidth restriction that I face when I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
about this stuff, right? It's like, okay, well, how do I do this with clarity and a speedy way, where I feel like I'm actually providing something that's actually worth spending a minute reading. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I mean, okay, so yeah, I get this backlog of stuff, and I am wrestling with the idea of, you know, there's these services where you can schedule posts, right? Like, doesn't Hootsuite do something like this?
Hootsuite, Tumblr, you can schedule. Squarespace, you can schedule.
Right.
I found a plugin for Mac Mail that lets you send later. So if you're using email to drive a sort of a pipeline that gets content somewhere, whether you're emailing to something that then can tweet or post to a blog,
Hmm.
I think it's just called Send Later.
Oh, let's write that down for the show notes.
Yeah, and
And
yeah,
later. Okay, but here's so you talked about like that cost of the actual writing of the thing. Here's a cost that I think about a lot is the cost of being present for the discussion.
hmm.
Right? So like sometimes I'll think about like, I want to share a little bit about you know, oh, it's a Boulder and Fleet update night, so I want to like talk a little bit on Twitter about like things I think about when I think about the comic. And I think I've really only got 15 minutes before I gotta go to bed, you know, and I got an early day tomorrow. I can't, in good conscience, get hung up in a conversation that's gonna cut into my, you know, precious 6 hours of sleep that I get. right?
Mm.
It's not that I don't care. It's just that it's a resource management thing. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I guess I'm not doing that tonight. I wish I could. But so that's another cost that I think about too is like when is an optimal time? And so when I think about scheduling, I think like, well, that seems like it solves the problem because then I can like sort of do the writing part when I have the optimum time to do it and it gets filtered out later. But if I want to be present and actually respond in any kind of thoughtful way and not misunderstand what people are saying to me, because I've run into that a lot where like I've had terrific conversations with like Becca Hilburn actually on Twitter. We talk about different things she's struggling with, and I completely missed the point of what she was talking about because so I want to try to be like super present and everything, but finding that time is also super hard, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean those are two different problems, and that is difficult. They're totally tied together. You have the tending to and hosting of essentially this attentive moment, like a little mini party.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just not show up to it.
Right.
Yet it's pretty easy to find ways to schedule it out, and maybe figure out a work pattern that lets you build this up and have a buffer and all those wonderful things that feel like gold, like you're sitting on a mountain of gold when you have content that you haven't published and it's ready to publish. You're like, I could publish this anytime. It feels so powerful.
Look at this mountain of potential energy I'm sitting on. With but a flick of my finger, it could explode.
It's magical. That
It
it's
is.
so fleeting and so rare for me. But I know the feeling. It's happening.
Yeah. So, to something you talked about, workflow, like finding
Mm.
workflow to adjusting workflow to accommodate for this. So I came across this recently. I wanted to pitch this at you and to the leaners in general. I emailed a cartoonist recently about some A2CAF stuff. Somebody's coming to A2CAF, and their autoresponder, like I emailed them like on a Monday, and they had an autoresponder that came back to me, and it said, "Oh, thanks so much for emailing me. I only answer emails on Thursdays or Tuesdays and Thursdays or something like that, like 2 days a week." Right? And I was like, it like just hit me like a blast of wind from wind. I was like, "Whoa, you could do that? That sounds pretty great."
Mm.
And I thought about it and I was like, that sounds so luxurious. But then I thought, for a lot of for the line of work that we're in, okay, I'm gonna say for working on your side project, for working on your creative project, if you have a day job, different thing. But for your side project, when you're trying to maintain a presence around a thing, it's not really a luxury. I think that's something that's enforceable, is it not? That's something you could bake in to your
Mm-hmm.
system if you honor it, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. And there's no saying that there aren't special exceptions to that. That you get to say that you have essentially created this expectation with people in general. Clearly, if you're doing that auto reply, it's interesting because it sends multiple messages. It says that email matters enough to me where I'm going to put this mechanism in place. Yet I have to I'm time boxing it. So I mean, this person's trying to not mismanage expectations. So
And what I did, next thing I did, because this is totally like a side note, but like it relates to what I'm about to say. The other day, I was walking with Ann, and we were sorting out a problem together, and she said, "That sounds a lot like something Rob would say. Are you pulling from Rob's script?" And I was like, I don't know, but I hope that he's rubbing off on me. That'd be really cool. I would love it if I could solve problems like Rob.
you
So
are. I don't know what to do right now. You're
anyway, I'm
very
moving on
kind.
fast.
All right.
I'm moving on fast. So anyway, the first thing I thought after I got that autoresponder was like, all right, I'm gonna watch. I'm going to observe and I'm going to collect evidence. Like, does this person honor that statement?
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, that cartoonist does. Like every time
Wow.
I have an email exchange with that person, I get a response either Tuesday or whatever the other day was. I forget. But I kept
Wow.
track of it and I was like, okay, yep, consistent. Right? So then I thought, okay, that is an enforceable thing and it's not an unreasonable thing, providing that you
Yeah.
Honor the contract.
Everyone's mileage may vary, but yeah, it's to make that kind of claim. It certainly, it seems like it would hold more value if you followed through with it. Um, that's funny. I mean,
So,
so I'm imagining all sorts of email queuing mechanisms where people can say, "You have email queuing ticket number 56. Your estimated time to wait for my email response is infinity." Or,
oh, now you
or
want to talk about sitting on a pile.
anyway, no, yeah, it's but no, instead of being so complicated as that silly imagination thing, it no seems it's interesting and sounds like it can work.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean, it would require a little bit of scheduling, but I mean, you and I are the kind of people who aren't averse to scheduling, right?
no, I need the calendar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put it in
I
these
remember
spaces.
I remember exactly when that day happened. I was 32 and I was like, "Oh, I got to buy a calendar." Like a real grown up.
Uh,
Like I think
well,
that was the last of my like youthful cartoonist dreams. Like the last of my like unrealistic expectations about being a cartoonist. That was when they died. It was like, "Oh, I got to have a calendar to actually maintain this stuff."
it's your calendiversary mitzvah.
Yeah, it's coming up. Um but now I love it. Now I
Mm.
mean like spreadsheeting and calendars are actually like super fun in their way. But um anyway, so it got me thinking about like something I did years ago. This is a long time ago. It was like when I would have update days, I would have, and I know I've talked about this before, had like a chat room. It was an IRC chat that I ran with my readers where I would talk with them. Like the new page dropped, I'm going to make myself present. We can talk about it. And all I did was I said, I'm showing up every week. I'll be here from this time to this time. It's up to you guys to find the time to be there if you want to be there. And people did, right? And I think that part of it was that kind of that scarcity, and it made it a little bit more manageable. So it was because like the comic had a forum, right? So we had there was a place where I was supposed to be checking in and conversing with readers, but this was sort of like the the prime location, and the other places were secondary. I'll get to those when I get to them, but this is the one where I'm actually going to be present. So I'm thinking about that again. Like, okay, how can I work that into and actually have it be a scheduled activity that I can, you know, work into my schedule so that I know I can achieve it, and then it's not interfering with other things. It's not, we're not interfering. It's not creating friction with other parts of my schedule, right?
It sounds like I mean, there's two mechanisms that I think are really key here. You're describing a schedule and you're describing a buffer, right? So those are two mechanisms you can use for either your primary content or being social about that. So you could have a content calendar, content buffer, social calendar, social buffer.
Yes, content calendar. Let's go there for a second because this
Mm-hmm.
is something that I found. My observation is that I found that it's easier for me to honor that on Patreon, and I think because that the contract is more explicit. Right? I'm accountable to a group of people. I'm not going to profess that I'm awesome at it because I have posted some things where it's like, oh, I was supposed to do an early page drop today, or rather yesterday. Okay, I'm posting the page 6 hours early instead of 24 hours early, right? Um, so I'm still making my deal, but I'm not making it quite as like the way I would want it to. But I'm still showing up, and I'm making, and it's on my mind every week. Every week I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to put on the Patreon feed today or this week, kind of thing. Um, but having observed that, I was like, okay, well, why can't I do that with my blog, with my other presences, wherever you want to call them? So I started creating sort of like a universal capture. Like I made actually a Trello board of like, okay, here I'm going to categorize what are the kinds of things I want to share to create conversation around the stuff I do, and using like my smartphone when I'm finding interesting things. Like anytime, like some Chris Oatley might share something on Twitter, like this is a really great blog post about maintaining creativity. I read it. It's good. I don't want to just do a simple retweet. I want to add my own commentary to it, grab it, put it someplace, right? So that becomes another pile of gold that I'm sitting on. And I started capturing, but finding the time. and scheduling the time to put that stuff back out clearly is a problem because I went and looked at that Trello board and I was like, whoa, this is the digital version of Hoarders. There's a lot of stuff in here.
Uh, yeah.
So haven't solved that yet. But I'm thinking about that whole like, okay, there's 2 days a week where I answer email. Maybe there's like 1 day a week where I block out 4 hours, and that's going to be setting this stuff up. I don't know yet. But I'm curious if we could revisit the idea of capture.
Yeah.
How do you capture the incidentals?
I use Pinboard for a lot of the incidentals. So
Pinboard.in?
Yeah, so that is a social bookmarking. I use it in an antisocial way, but like it's a social bookmarking tool that you can see that it's a lot like what Delicious was. I believe it's the person who created.
You're going back in time, my friend.
Yeah, like Huey Lewis, yes, and. It's I believe it's the gentleman that created Delicious that then moved on and built something that could do that again because it wasn't being Delicious wasn't being cared and fed for very well from its owner. And anyway, it's pretty straightforward. You can bookmark stuff. You can use a bookmarklet or use an app that allows you to you can send stuff to it that behind the scenes the app is storing stuff in Pinboard. So that's bookmarks.
Okay, so that's for like capturing ephemera on the web that you encounter that you want to potentially repurpose in some way.
Exactly.
The Pinboard is good for like capturing like notes, sketches, doodles.
It's not good for that. It's truly, this was an interesting tweet. This is an interesting link, and then saving bookmarks to those things in particular. If you save a tweet and the tweet has a link, it will remember a link to both the tweet and the resource it's being linked to. So it does a couple of those things automatically, but it's really all about the business of links style ephemera.
Okay.
My other captures are, I think they're pretty consistent from the last time we reviewed it. I carry a notepad that I put things on index cards. That goes into my scanner, which goes into Evernote. So nightly, I put my index cards into Evernote. I will review those at least weekly to then put those into tasks for OmniFocus or just to become like quick thoughts that I may journal down. Then my journal is in day one, so that has like the general, capturing verbose or not too verbose thoughts about stuff that's going on. And then I take a lot of pictures, photographs.
And where do these pictures go?
iCloud, the photo app.
Are you doing like a regular review on those?
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes it's pretty rare that I used to have to then get, sometimes it'd be like, oh, there's a whiteboard or there's there's some kind of essentially a document or a bunch of Post-it notes, right? From thinking something through. And that I just will directly go straight into Evernote for the most part. But yeah, I mean, so is that the kind of thing you're thinking of as far as capture, like just making sure like whatever seems natural, get this stuff into a tool?
Yeah, get this stuff into a tool and get this stuff into a tool that works with the way my brain works. So like I want to love Evernote, Rob. I want to really bad because I see the power that it has. Mm-hmm. But for some reason I never find what I want in there. Like I can put a whole bunch of stuff in there, but then I have to know what to look for in order to get it again.
Wow, yeah. So do you use the Clip to Evernote Chrome plugin?
I was using that for a while. Yeah, why do you bring that up?
So I bring that up because anytime you do a search on Google, it will put Evernote results that are just privately. It's essentially adjusting. Injecting content into the page locally. It's not throwing the stuff into the cloud or whatever, but it's essentially securely looking into your Evernote content and then bringing it up alongside your Google search results.
Okay.
So I find a lot of things through that approach, where it's like,
Okay.
oh yeah,
Yes.
this is. I did do some looking into this before, and there it is. And then if you click on it, it opens up Evernote.
Gotcha. Well, maybe I have to turn that back on. I turned that plugin off a while ago. Because my chief problem with it, I think, was that it wasn't browsable for a visual thinker, right? Like when I'm flipping through like notebooks and stuff, I'm not reading it. I'm scanning for like visual cues of like, oh, I remember when I drew that, or if it's like it's clippings of things, I want to see the clipping, right? Even the context of the content, like what was around it on the page, can be like a cue for me. So that's why I started playing around with Trello, thinking like, okay, I can easily capture images to Trello and they turn into a card with like a title that I give it and then a snippet of the image that I associated with it, right? Even if I do like a web clip. But the problem with Trello is, on the one hand, it's very powerful in that it creates like the sense of priority by creating like the stacked vertical list. Right? Here's the order in which you added the things. Now you know the order in which to take them on. There's only so much room in that list for a visual flow, and so then now I'm scrolling forever. And that's the thing I discovered is I had this one Trello card, or what are they called? They're not cards, they're lists. Yeah, a Trello list, just called like what did I call it? It was just like ongoing capture. Like this is the place where this is my dump. This is where I dump all ideas and I'll review it. And then I didn't look at it for a couple weeks and I went to review it and it was like, oh, I don't even know what's in here anymore. So
Yeah, I mean, inherently that becomes the problem. Like, there's ubiquitous capture isn't useful if it's a one-step habit. It inherently implies a capture curative process that then you get the use out of it, whatever the tool you're using, because you can overwhelm the inbox of anything. And then now that it's so abundantly full of whatever, it becomes really hard to use because you can't sift it visually, or if you're not tending to it ever, then like I wish there was like, well, the OS 10 search has become a lot better because it will search across a variety of resources. Like it will look into Evernote. Yeah, so Spotlight search is. It's between that and the Google whatever that is called, the clip to Evernote plug, Google
extension.
Chrome extension. Between those two, I find some things through serendipity where it's just like I'm doing a search, things turn up. But yeah, I don't have a great like one stop. It's a bunch of steps. It's like I know.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing like you're doing like a regularly scheduled check-in.
Yeah.
And review.
That's the way I've found that I can get some use out of this and know like, oh, I did review that, and this I still have to review, and actually go back and find things. I do a little bit of light tagging in Evernote when I'm doing that. Nothing extreme, but I wish it were easier. I wish it were a lot more straightforward.
Well, I think what we're getting to at the end here, and maybe I'll tell you what, I'm going to save it for final thoughts. How about that? Because we got to get to final thoughts and we got to wrap this guy up after all. So, if you listening to this right now on your podcatcher, on your mobile device, or your MP3 player, or your iTunes, or whatever kind of computer device that you listen to these shows on, if you're listening to this and you think like, hey, this is good, this is interesting, I love the way these guys break down topics and think about them and discuss them, a great way that you can support the show for free, we've mentioned all these things you could spend money on, but here's a free thing you can do to help us out, is go to iTunes and give the show a star review, however many stars you think it deserves. Or you can even write a review if you want to be really awesome. Or you can go to something like Stitcher.com. The show's on Stitcher. You can give it a review there. Wherever you listen to audio stuff, give the show a star review. That helps more people discover it. And the more people that discover it, the more people that potentially will love it, the more people that will potentially support it and make it more sustainable. So it's a free, easy action for you to do that has a compounding effect in the future. If you're watching this on YouTube and you think the same things that I just described, good things, a great thing you could do right now is give the video a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel. That helps more people find the show as well. So thank you to everybody who has subscribed. Thanks to everybody who has given the videos thumbs up. And thanks to everybody who's given us reviews on iTunes. That's super great. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we do. Thank you.
Time for final thoughts. So it looks like really the only answer to bandwidth constraints is structure.
Inherently, because like which cost are you going to reduce, how are you going to gain efficiency? It's about doing something structured with time and effort. So practicing the posts helps a lot, or like whatever kind of form of content you're trying to share, you will get faster at it, so it will cost less time, but then to make the time for it too. And then the time to process all this stuff. If you are trying to have a mineable, set of like great things to incorporate in what you're sharing, and you're making like a, some kind of social set of content, having a calendar and some way to produce a buffer will help. And I mean, that's what I'm going to try to do more now. I mean, I've had mild success with that and dabbling here and there, but inherently it's an extra thing, and it'll be a challenge to keep up.
It still is an extra thing. There's no question that it will continue to be an extra thing that we have to do. But I think
that's probably what I have to combat is stop thinking about it as an extra thing. It's just part of the thing.
Part of the thing, right? Yeah, like if you want to treat it like a business, you have to treat it like a business. And when you are running a burger joint, you don't get to say, I don't feel like making burgers right now. Unless you have low-paid employees who can do it for you.
Well, and it makes sense to advertise your business and reach out to the community and all that. That way they can discover it and they can convert.
Right.
It becomes possible through that kind of outreach.
But the takeaway I got today is that this is a manageable thing, but it does require some creative thinking around scheduling. I think part of the reason it feels so overwhelming for me most of the time is that there's an implicit suggestion that this should be an ever-present, ongoing thing. Right? You see. Yeah.
There's examples to counter that. And so what I think can help, I agree. I feel that pressure too. But there are lots of examples of creative projects. And even when they're big budget with campaigns and like there are things such as television seasons, right? There's a time between when movies are released. There's a time between when a book is going out and when a book is released. And the initial support of it looks different than the support of it later on. So it's that change, I think, is important to somehow weave that in. Which not that I have that. Let's see, a very insightfully considered for myself, but I know that I need to consider it to make it less pressure.
Well, thanks, Rob. Thanks for walking on this topic with me. I appreciate
Dude, thank you. This is a fun topic. Thanks for bringing it up. And I think it's fun to have this as a marker. This is another place on our journey in doing Lean Into Art where we've explored this thing in a little bit different way.
And let me say, maybe I should have put this at the end, but we'll make noise about this again in the weeks to come. Rob's going to be at A2CAF this summer, June 17th through 19th. in Ann Arbor, Michigan. You're going to get to hang out with the Lean Into Art guys. And also, the Galaxy Super Adventure team will be there as well. So it's like
That's awesome.
all of us in a room together. How cool
That's
is that
crazy.
going to be?
That is amazing. And in case anyone else is wondering, so A2CAF has been around for years. It was named Kids Read Comics. It has transformed, and now it is A2CAF. I don't represent the event, but I did need to learn that, right? So A2CAF
Yes.
is
The Ann Arbor Comics Arts Festival. A2 stands for Ann Arbor Comic Arts Festival. Same event. We're just changing the name and the branding a little bit to make it a little bit more friendly to teens and adults who don't necessarily think that they are into kids media, right? So trying to widen the appeal of the show, but it's still a family-friendly comics festival where you get to do hands-on comics workshops. It's a convention where instead of just getting an autograph from somebody, you sit down and you draw with somebody. Sit down and make things with somebody. It's pretty cool.
It is
I'm very
amazing.
proud of that event.
It's an honor to even to be to attend it and take be in some part. It's fun and awesome.
A2CAF.com. That's where you're going to find more information about the show. So, yeah, I'm excited about announcing some more things happening with it in the weeks to come. So, all right, everybody. Thanks for downloading, watching, and listening. Show notes will be available at leanintoart.com, and we're going to give some other social cues in a second. Until then, until the next time we meet, I have been Jersey Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jersey on Twitter.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger, also of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to kill the stream. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody.
Yay, thank you for hanging out.